Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast where we believe that you can get the important things done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. My name is Tan. I'm the founder and CEO of Agent Efficiency. We started this company back in 2011 to help people become more productive at work and in life. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Brooks Duncan, the COO of Agent Efficiency. How's life, Brooks?
It's pretty good. I just had to mute my mic and yell, "Guys, quiet upstairs!" So the kids are home. So it's that time of year again. Good times.
Yeah, it is podcasting time, so we can't be disturbed. This is kind of like our deep work for the day here, but it's a fun type of work. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about what's been kind of happening in our industry and all new trends that we're seeing that you want to be aware of so you can stay ahead of the curve. So we have three important topics to go over today. One of them is, are password managers still a necessary tool in 2022? That's the first thing we're going to be talking about. The other thing we're going to be talking about is the whole idea of like work from anywhere. And this is a trend that might be coming up where you could be working from a boat and remote location. So that's something that's very exciting. But also, we're going to be talking a little bit about the metaverse and why we think the real life is going to be the next big productivity trend, not actually being in the metaverse. So lots of things to get into today. Next week, we're going to be talking about communication protocols and guidelines. This is something that we're known for how to optimize and streamline your communications within your company and in your team for faster output, but also less headaches. So you definitely want to check out next week's episode. And as always, we like to kick it off with our top three favorite resources. So I added them here today. And the first one I want to share with everybody is a salad that I've been eating. I've been following this blog on and off called Mark's Daily Apple, and he was on a podcast a few years ago too. He has this blog post called where he shares his big ass salad, as he likes to call it. So it's a salad I've been enjoying the last few weeks or so. And even though it's kind of focused on keto, so meaning like low carb, I've actually been enjoying it by making slight modifications to it. So I'm going to link to the blog post where you can learn about how you can put the salad together. And it's something that I've been enjoying every day for lunch or dinner. And so I highly recommend you check it out. The second one, this is something a lot of people don't know, but Apple sells refurbished products. So that basically means that you can buy almost brand new Apple products for a reduced price. So they're basically quote unquote used items, but they're typically items that have been returned or recycled through their program or were defective within their warranty period and have authentic replacement parts put in. And like all Apple products, it comes with a default 1-year warranty. So if something goes wrong, you can always return it and get a new device or get it fixed for no cover or fee whatsoever. So I've actually been using refurbished products for a few years now, and I've never had any issues. And I recently made a new purchase where I bought the Mac Mini M1, and I did it through the refurbished program as well. So that's something I want to encourage people to check out. If you're looking to save money in this recession that's pretty much here, go check out refurbished Apple products. And then the third resource I want to recommend is a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. So you probably heard of this author. He has multiple best-selling books, but his first book was actually Give and Take. And it's the whole idea that people who are givers tend to be more successful than those who are not. So it's the idea that nice people do finish first sometimes and not last. And the book just outlines all the different research strategies that have shown that if you tend to be someone who likes to give to people without asking for anything in return or expecting anything, you tend to come ahead as long as you know some of the few strategies that he outlines in the book. So highly recommend you check out those resources. We'll have links to everything we just shared in the show notes, and you can find them at theproductivityshow.com/415. So, Brooks, let's get into the roundup. Let's get a brief overview of all the newsworthy updates that have been kind of floating around in our space. What do you have for us today?
Yeah, let's do it. Big fan of the refurb store too, by the way. I bought lots of stuff through there, so it's high quality stuff. All right, so on the Apple topic, the first thing I want to bring up is Apple's WWDC event. So they unveiled the new iOS 16, macOS Ventura, and all the stuff related to that, watchOS and all that type of stuff. So we'll have a link to the highlights from that in the show notes. And this is their, if you're not familiar, it's their developers conference, but they always have like a keynote at the beginning that is more for the rest of us, not just for developers. And then through the rest of it, they do more deep dives. So lots of different stuff they talked about there, but I thought I'd highlight some of the announcements that are kind of related to productivity. So for iOS 16, they're going to be releasing customizable home screens. So this is something that a lot of people have wanted for a very long time. And when I say home screens, I mean lock screens, sorry, customizable lock screens. This is something people have wanted for a long time. Android users are laughing, but it's finally coming to iOS. And the cool thing about that is it's the same widgets as the Apple Watch. So there's going to be a lot of innovation here because it's easy for developers to make these things. That's the first one. Number two, in iOS 16 also, they're adding the feature to mark as unread in messages. So this is another one that people have wanted for a long time. It sounds really funny tying that to productivity, but a lot of people use read and unread as a way to flag things to take action. You know, they'll get a message, they'll read it, and then they want to make it unread so that they can, when they're maybe back somewhere where they can deal with it, then they can deal with it. And that is a feature that they're going to be adding finally. So that's another one. Not saying that's the best way to do it productivity wise, but a lot of people do it. watchOS 9, there's going to be a lot of health related enhancements like they always do. There's going to be advanced sleep tracking. So this is something that's near and dear to us at the productivity show, even more heart monitoring features. And then they're even going to have a medications tracking app. So that's pretty exciting for people who have to take a lot of medications. And then for macOS Ventura and iPadOS, there's going to be a new window managing system. So that's a big change. It's called Stage Manager. Allows you to have overlapping windows on the iPad, and you can do the same thing on the Mac if you want. But of course, if you want to still use Mac the old way that we all use, you can do that too. But for maybe newer users who are coming from iOS, maybe that's a huge change. And then for macOS Ventura, there's a feature called camera continuity. So it's kind of funny. A while ago, we almost talked about on the podcast an app called Camo that lets you use your iPhone as a webcam, but we cut the whole section from the show notes. And it's a good thing we did because now Apple is releasing their own feature. So you can connect your Mac to your iOS device and use that as a camera. So it's going to be 100 times, well, maybe not 100, but it's going to be way more high quality than any webcam you can get. So you can use your phone as a camera. So that's the first one. Quick roundup of WWDC, but like I said, we'll have links to a bunch of other stuff. Number two, ClickUp 3.0 is coming. So if you're not familiar with ClickUp, it's a really popular task and collaboration app. I know a lot of listeners use it. Some of our users say they use it within their family. And of course, there's business uses as well. ClickUp released a YouTube video called "The Future of Productivity is Coming." So of course, that got our attention. And it turns out they're going to be releasing ClickUp 3.0, which they say is going to be a huge redesign, like a ground up redesign. It's a bunch of infrastructure stuff. They're also going to be really trying to make it like the glue, and a lot of apps have tried this, so we'll see if ClickUp is able to do it, but they really want to be the glue that your organization uses to connect to all these other systems. So they're having universal search, so it can search information on all sorts of different servers. And really, they want to be a team app. So like many of these apps, they're kind of going for a real team aspect, which makes sense because that's where the money is. Big changes can be polarizing, so it'll be interesting to see how the reaction to this goes. That's number two. And then number three is Alfred 5 early access is available. So we'll have a link to more information on that. If you're not familiar with Alfred, we talk about it a lot on the productivity show, so you probably are. It's a Mac-only app, but it's one of our most used and discussed apps. I know you use it, Tan. I use it as well. Alfred 4 was released way back in 2019. It's kind of starting to show its age a bit. There's been new apps that have come out since, like Raycast is a popular one that we haven't really talked too much about on the podcast. That's another launcher. Alfred is an app and program launcher, by the way. And they've just released early access for Alfred 5. At first, I was kind of excited by it. I don't generally do betas, so I haven't signed up for it myself. but it seems like most of the changes are on the workflow builder part. So you can build these automations and workflows within Alfred. Really, really powerful. I do that. And a lot of the enhancements are to make that easy to have conditionals. You can run shortcuts on your Mac, which is a great feature, and that sort of thing. Weirdly, though, it doesn't seem like they've changed actually using Alfred a lot outside of the workflow builder, but for your day-to-day use, it doesn't seem that different. So it's kind of funny they're doing a big re-release, but not enhancing the part that you use 90% of the time. So we'll see what the reaction is to that. How about you, Tan? Anything from here grabbing you? Are you gonna upgrade to iOS 16 when it's available? You gonna stick with Alfred 4? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a really useful segment that we have here on the podcast because I know many of us are so busy, so it's hard to keep up sometimes what's happening, what's worthwhile staying up to date on. And so, especially with anything Apple related, they release so much stuff across just multiple platforms like iOS, watchOS, macOS, right, iPad OS, and so. I find it very helpful just to stay up to date this way. So I'm learning a lot myself by doing the research and kind of sharing with everybody, but also having talked to many people. I know a lot of people start using ClickUp a lot more in the last maybe 18 months or so, especially if you have a small team or a family. So I would say this is kind of becoming more popular than Asana now, from what I've seen, especially if you're a smaller team, like I would say 4 people or less. ClickUp seems to be the way to go. When I was in Europe for the Ukraine aid, when I was volunteering, I talked to a few nonprofit organizations, and for some reason, again, this was in Warsaw, so it could be very concentrated, but all of them use ClickUp. So my triggers kind of went off. So, oh, this is very interesting to see what they decided to do. So exciting to see all that, and I stopped using Alfred a while back because I've been super loyal to LaunchBar. So, but LaunchBar hasn't been doing many updates either. And so, if you heard the shocker of a few weeks ago how I stopped using BusyCal and moved over to Fantastical, I'm hoping LaunchBar is listening to this and saying, "Hey, we need to keep Tian happy." I hope to introduce some innovation because otherwise he moved to Alfred, and that might happen because who knows? I like using apps that do continue to innovate and become better, not just become stale because they're the best at the time. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it's kind of good that there's raycast in the space too, because that competition and different ideas often spurn innovation. So I'm really excited about that. All right, cool.
Let's move on to the second segment. But before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our TPS Plus subscribers and listeners. So if you're unfamiliar with TPS Plus, it's the upgraded version of the Productivity Show where you get episodes ad-free a week earlier, plus some bonus content as well that you cannot get anywhere else. So if you like the sound of that, you should become a subscriber. It's also a way for you to contribute and show support to the show. So if you want to do that, you can go to theproductivityshow.com/plus. So that's PLUS. And I want to thank everybody who's been a subscriber so far. Thank you so much. That's been really helpful for us. And I encourage everyone to sign up if you've been loving our content so far and want to continue to support us. So thanks everybody for joining us so far. And let's move on to the second segment here. So that is what we call industry happening. So we're kind of going to be going over stuff that we've been seeing all over the internet, what people are talking about, what some of the trends are. And Brooks, you put this first segment in. You asked, do you even need third-party password managers in 2022? Please explain.
Yeah, this is going to be heresy for those who have listened to the productivity show for a long time, because we've always said, and honestly continue to say, that a solid password manager is a must. For years and years and years, we've talked about on the podcast how Tan, you and I both use 1Password, have for many, many years. For our personal, I use it and my family as well. And then we use it at work as well. And that 1Password is one of them. LastPass is another one that we used for years. In the live stream chat, Joel's talking about how he's thinking of switching to KeyPass, which is another one because of some of the changes that 1Password has made. So there's a lot of great options out there. And we've always said, we use one password, but the important thing is that you use one. And we're not saying that password managers aren't important, but the question I'm wondering about is these third-party ones, do we even need them anymore? Because I was just reading an article recently about how Google has announced that they're making a big upgrade and investment into the password manager that's built into Chrome and Android. And so we'll have a link to information on that. And basically they're making it so, you've always been able to save passwords, when you log in and stuff like that. But now they're making it so that you can manually add logins and passwords and not just rely on Chrome saving it. They're going to make the features unified on all their platforms. So it used to be Chrome worked a certain way, Android worked another way, and that it wasn't quite feature matched. But now they're going to really make it unified, and they're going to offer passkeys, which allow you to log in without passwords. So that's kind of on the Google side. And then Apple, of course, they have their keychain manager, which now syncs with iCloud, and they keep improving that with every iOS and Mac OS release. They're going to support passkeys, like Google said they're going to. They just make it easier to use and make it more and more tied in. And I know these third-party ones, like 1Password, does a great job of tying into iOS, etc. But pretty soon, if not already, the password managers that are built into Apple's tools, Google's tools, and Windows are going to be as good or maybe even better than the 1Passwords, the LastPass, and that type of thing. So it makes you wonder, why even bother with a third-party one when the ones that you already have, everyone already has and has the ability to use? Why even bother investing in one of these third-party ones? What do you think, Tan? I shouldn't have spoken for you when I said you use 1Password. I know you do for work, because I do too. But if you were to start right now, would you use, for your personal stuff anyway, would you use 1Password, or would you just use the ones that are built right into your OS?
Well, well, seeing what Google is doing and what Apple is doing in this case, I think there's different use cases for different people. So if you're listening to the productivity show, you're probably a little bit more intermediate when it comes to this stuff. So I would say using a password manager like 1Password is very beneficial. Or another way of saying this is I think Apple and Google are targeting people who typically don't use password managers. So I know this sounds weird, but most people do not use a password manager. Like, just look around your family, your friends. Most of them use maybe like like the saved passwords, right? That you can kind of use in Chrome and Safari right now, but they don't really know what a password manager is. My parents don't know what it is. Most people in a random office don't know what it is, unless they have some sort of IT team that kind of enforces everybody to use something. Otherwise, they typically don't really use it. People don't go out of their way to really search for this stuff. And so I think the use case for most of these solutions, which I think is great, is for people who don't have a password manager now and are not interested in getting one, but just want to make it easier to log into different websites and just don't want to memorize a lot of passwords, right? Like, most people still use 1Password, not like the app, with like 1Password to log into most websites. And that's kind of scary. And that's obviously not a good practice. You want to have, ideally unique passwords for every single login. But the reality is that's just not the case. And so I think this is just another great initiative by the companies to make it a little bit more secure and hopefully easier for people to improve their security without introducing a new app in the mix that people have to pay for and stuff, right? It's kind of like how Amazon does a lot of research on products that sell really well and then create their own version and call it Amazon Basics or something, or they have their own brand that is not called Amazon, but it's actually an Amazon brand that you don't even know is owned by Amazon, because they can see what products are moving, what's selling really well, and then they go, hey, let's make our own version, and we take up all the profit margin. So this is kind of like what I see happening here is Apple and Google see that password managers are probably growing and there's a strong use case for them, but they can natively integrate them and make it much better and more secure and probably more streamlined as well. So that's My take on it, I would say personally, I'm going to continue to use one password just because it's cross-platform. So it's easy to use. I can take it kind of quote unquote anywhere and log in anywhere when I set it up and deploy it. But there's also a case to be said for having a tool that specializes on one thing and does it really well. So um, the other thing I would say is because I've been using it for, I don't know, 7, 8 years now, there's just so much data there that if I were to move over to Chrome or something like that, it would just be a lot of work for marginal gains. So it would be no use for me to really do that.
Yeah, one thing in the live stream that Tom says is that he says, I will tell you that password managers keep up with the change in security industry. So that is one thing that I would say is on the side of using these third-party ones is, like you said, there's something to be said for a company that just focuses on a certain area because they would tend to iterate a little faster than maybe more of the platform vendors who might only release updates with new operating system updates and stuff like that. So there definitely is something to be said for that focus on one thing. I also get a little nervous about lock-in using a platform's password solutions. You know, you can have your stuff in the Apple keychain and that's great, but what if you sometimes use Windows, or what if you decide to switch, or if you use Chrome, you've got your password saved in Google's password system, but maybe this is actually the situation I'm in. I use Chrome on my computer, but Safari on my mobile device, and so then it's not really as seamless as it is if you use one of these third-party systems that work anywhere. So that's why I'm the same thing. I'll continue to use them. I will say, using your example of the maybe less sophisticated people, my dad kept trying to hear us talking about password managers, so he got some of them and he tried to use them and he just found them very confusing, and I was always having to help him, and I'm like, I'm happy to help you, but maybe for you it would just be easier to use the one built in, you know. So like you said, these programs don't have to be for everybody, but I definitely think there are still a place for it. What I find really interesting is curious if these pass keys are going to take off and how that impacts things. If everything is going to be using public-private keys and pass keys and stuff like that, and just using your device to log in, it'll be interesting to see if there's a place for a third party, even though I'm sure they'll support it, if there's a place for that as well. And then the other thing is, I like these third-party tools, the ones that allow you to have family or team base. So, you know, you're not going to have your family stuff saved in Safari necessarily. We have our family on 1Password, and that works really well. So yeah, there's pros and cons. I think there's still a place for them, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend somebody starting out in this stuff necessarily start with them. That's my personal opinion. All right, so that is topic number one, about password managers in 2022. Topic number two is also another one that I'm curious your thoughts are, Tan, especially since famously you either travel or you don't leave your 4-block radius of your apartment building. And topic number two is the true work from anywhere might actually be coming finally. And we always hear about how hybrid work is here to stay. You know, you can work from the office or you can work from home, whatever works best for you and your employer. But you know, the whole idea of being a knowledge worker is that you should theoretically be able to work from anywhere, right? But anywhere, of course, generally means from a hotel, from an apartment somewhere, from an Airbnb. But what about everywhere else besides those? And I was reading this article about how Starlink, which is an Elon Musk thing through SpaceX, which is a satellite internet. It's been in testing for quite some time. I know that you mentioned Ukraine earlier. And Poland, they deployed it to Ukraine, for example. That is a supposedly quite good, I've never tried it, but quite good satellite internet service that is able to go for a lot more places. But the limitation has always been it needed to be at a fixed place. So it needed to be, you know, at an apartment building, at a base somewhere, at a cabin somewhere. But they've just announced that it's now authorized, at least in the United States, for vehicles and things that aren't stationary. So cars, trucks, boats, aircraft even. It's authorized for all these different use cases. And to me, this really opens up the possibilities. Because I always had this kind of like, I think we talked about on a recent podcast that where I live in Vancouver, in the big cities, we have great internet, but you go even like 2 hours out of the city and there's nothing, no wireless service, no internet, nothing. And I always had this idea that it would be great to someday, especially since my wife's retirement plan involves me continuing to work, someday have like a cabin or something remote, but be able to use something like Starlink to have that kind of mobile internet. But what if you could do that again on a boat, or if you're living the hashtag van life, if you've got a mobile internet thing that you can put up, you can totally have this idea of being able to literally work from anywhere, not just anywhere with a internet connection. So what do you think of this, Tan? Is this, Austin actually strikes me as the type of place that this sort of idea of like the hashtag van life and traveling around would be popular. Do you know a lot of people who kind of like work on the go?
Ooh, do I know people who are living like that? I don't think so. I know a lot of people who've taken the van and kind of left town because either it got too expensive or for whatever reason. But I'm gonna have a contrarian take on this, and I would say I think overall it would be a net plus to have this because more people would have access to the internet, which I think is a plus, expected value plus EV move. However, for most of us, if we're already connected to the internet already from home or from work or wherever, I would actually take the opposite side, which is most of us need to disconnect more from the internet than to connect to it. And what I mean with that is most of us are glued to our phones, to the computer, to social media, trying to stay up to date on everything. And there's actually a bigger trend of like, what do you call digital detoxes or just being disconnected for a day to kind of like rest our brains and kind of like be well rested and just kind of being off the grid for a little bit. And so I think there's a lot of value to do the opposite, which is yes, it's good to have all this, remote access. And I think a lot of people would benefit from that. However, if you're from the city like I am, you actually don't want that whatsoever. You actually want to be able to go out in the woods, have no internet, and just disconnect and be present in nature and just enjoy that and not worry about, if you can have Wi-Fi or not. Like, yeah, it'd be nice, I'm sure, but most of us actually want to escape that altogether. So I think overall it's still going to be a net plus move for most people. But personally, as someone who lives in the city, I'm not going to be the type of customer who's going to need this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just saw an article about how these parts of rural Yukon, which is an area up in the north of Canada, who have satellite internet that they pay for through some provider. The providers just decided that they're not going to support them anymore. So all of a sudden, their internet is gone. And I was just thinking, this idea of having a way that you can have some sort of broadband internet that you can take anywhere just really, really empowers you. But like you said, with great power comes great responsibility. You've got to be able to know when to shut that off. I totally agree with you there. So yeah, if you are somebody who could benefit or would use this kind of like mobile internet, I would love to hear from you. If nothing else, then to give me ideas. So just hit us up at asianefficiency.com or at Asian Efficiency on social media. I would love to hear some uses you might have for this. All right, Tan. So that was mine. The true work from anywhere might be coming. How about you? What do you have for our third topic here?
So speaking of working from anywhere, I would say the other interesting trend that I've noticed is that with everything that's going on in the world with going towards digital, some people even call it going into the metaverse. I think there's a big case to be made that as that is going on, there's actually going to be a bigger need and experience for doing stuff in person. So I know many of you have probably heard that Facebook has renamed itself to Meta, right? And it's the idea that we're going to live in the metaverse and have like digital identities and online identities and have new personalities and personas online so that Brooks and I can actually interact with each other in a digital world and co-work together and stuff like that. And I think at some point that will happen. However, as that is developing, which could be still 5 to 10 years away, even if that is still true and that is here, I would say there's still a lot of value, and if not, becomes even more important to doing stuff in person. Because I know many of you have probably taken one of our online courses, right? And it's a great experience. You're learning a lot. There's a lot of valuable content. You can go through it at your own pace and such. But also, personally, I've taken a lot of online courses, and I've taken a lot of those online courses in person as well. We have the same version, but just taught in the in-person setting. And I've always preferred the in-person setting more than the online version, because there's something about being in a room, being with other people, being fully immersed so that you can focus. You're not like this distracted by anything else. And that when you go and have this, almost like capital investment of like going somewhere to travel, or staying overnight at a hotel, that makes you more vested to actually experience the material that you're about to learn, whether it's a workshop, a seminar, or a boot camp, or whatever that might be. And so as we're going more digital, I would actually encourage everybody else to think about what can we do the opposite of that. It's the idea of like when everyone's zigging, we zag. Like if everything's going digital, I would actually encourage people to start thinking about like how can you do more stuff in person. And that's something we're thinking about here at AE a lot, because we see everything going online, right? Like a lot of our quote unquote competitors have online courses now. A lot of people are doing online training, and that's all good and something we do as well. But I would actually say that there's more value in doing stuff in person, especially now that most of the lockdowns are gone. We're kind of getting back into the real world. I think we really crave that, real life experience much more than we think we do.
Yeah, it sounds kind of funny coming from a totally remote company like us. But one thing that I thought you've always done very intelligently is always had periodic real life get-togethers where the team kind of flies in at some location and then gets together. And so I had the opportunity to do a couple of those in the Philippines. And I always think of this one, it was actually the first one I attended, where we all got in a room, and we were talking about Alfred earlier. And, it's one thing for us to say in our internal meetings and stuff like that, hey, you guys really should take advantage of some of these productivity tools that we recommend, getting everybody on board. It's one thing for us to kind of like say that and say, people can take it away and stuff like that. But I just think of how we were all in the room, and then you and I like walked around to everybody and helped them all get set up and helped them all implement their first workflows and stuff like that. And it's just something that took, I don't know what, 20 minutes, let's say, that just had an immediate productivity impact that would have taken forever online if it ever even happened. So there's just something to real life stuff. I totally agree with you. And to me, it even extends beyond getting together. It's like physical items as well. Like back on TPS415, I had Leslie Josel on the podcast, and she was saying she works with a lot of students, and especially students that have trouble with procrastination and time management and stuff like that. And she said in that episode that, spoiler alert, one of the very first things she does when people have these issues is get them to get like an old school analog wall clock and put it up on the wall, because there's just something about being able to see and visualize time that works better than anything we can do digitally. At least that's what she finds. And so I think there's a lot of these type of equivalences to analog stuff, especially if you're running into productivity issues. Instead of like finding yet another app or something like that. I mean, we love apps here on the podcast, but if you're running into trouble, it might be a good idea, like you said, to zig when others are zagging and look for a more analog solution, because sometimes that can be the thing that makes the difference.
Tom in a live stream said, I did do the clock thing and it did work. It's odd but true, but also maybe I'm just getting old too. So I think there's a lot to be said for physical or real life tools, right? And that's kind of like how we've evolved over time. And I forgot which book I read this in, but it was basically the idea that we overvalue novelty and we underestimate the power of the tried and true and tested. So to give you an example, when was the chair invented? It's probably been like thousands of years when the chair was invented. Well, guess what? We're still sitting on chairs today, and it's still going to be here for the next few hundred years. Like, just because it's new doesn't mean it's going to be better. I think there's a lot to be said for what we have now, and all the tools are still valuable and are going to be valuable today. And yes, things are becoming more digital, and I think there's a lot of value in that, especially being streamlined. Like an example with a metaverse experience would be, imagine going into a digital world and you go to your let's say telephone provider, right? So in my case, I use T-Mobile. I would go into a T-Mobile store and I can directly interact with a customer representative that can help me fix the solution to my phone, for example. So instead of me going to the store, which is maybe 20 minutes away from where I live, I could hop in the metaverse, go to a digital experience where someone can fix my phone on the spot and have that taken care of. Like, that is a real world example that I think has a lot of value and use cases. But again, we are social creatures, and that's something we've all seen from the pandemic. As soon as lockdowns were lifted, people were eager to go out and do stuff in their real life, and that's something that we crave as well. And so I'm thinking, just thinking out loud here for the future of AE, like, yes, we're going to continue to do stuff online, but I think there's a lot of value to do stuff in person as well. So I'll be curious to see how we're going to tackle this as a plan. So we'll see what's going to happen there. So as always, good things come to an end, and that includes this episode here today. So I hope you enjoyed it so far. We always like to keep you up to date on what's been happening in our space, and so you can stay on top of everything, but also know what's ahead. And we always like to end things with an action item. So I encourage you to think about, what's the one thing that stood out for you today that you can take action on today. Commit to it, write it down, do it this week. We're big on speed of implementation. The faster you do it, the more likely you're going to get results. So try to take action on that today. And next week, we're going to be talking about communication protocols and guidelines. So you want to be sure to check that out. And everything that we talked about today can be found in the show notes. You can find them at theproductivityshow.com/415. And if you made it this far, one more ask, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be greatly appreciated, or on Spotify, wherever you listen to us. Leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it. It will help grow the show and spread awareness on what we do as well. So thank you so much, and we'll see you again next Productive Monday.